Hello, good morning, everybody. So I would I have 15 minutes. I plan to use the best of all the time that I've got. Most of the conversations that we have heard on DevOps are mostly around tools and technologies that enable DevOps. I plan to talk about the implementation aspect of it. Right? When we want to scale DevOps in any large organization, what are the challenges that we face? And I'll also share some of the experiences that we had at Broadridge about handling those challenges. My hope is that some of it will resonate with you guys, and maybe we can, it will help you in your own implementation, or maybe we can talk and see what else can we do to improve in some of those challenges and address some of those challenges that we have got. So, a lot of organizations are actually trying to implement DevOps and try to get the benefits out of a DevOps transformations. A lot of new age web technology companies like Amazon, Netflix, Flipkart have definitely shown us the benefits of doing that. They've got a lot of agility in their business. They are able to respond to the market quickly. But what about the traditional enterprises, right? We still have a lot of code. In fact, 90% of the code still reside with these these medium and large scale enterprises. And in fact, if you look at any large enterprises which has been in existence for around 10 to 15 years or probably more than that, you'll see there's a lot of, from a DevOps perspective, there's a lot of waste and inefficiencies. And obviously the benefit of implementing DevOps in these kind of organizations is much more. But when we look at the way DevOps is implemented in some of the new age companies, this is implemented from the beginning, where you have got code which is very, very testable code, as I think Mark pointed out, microservice architecture. But in large organization, we have got monolithic, which is not very, very adaptable to testabilities. It is not really something which can scale as fast as we expect. So are we saying that whatever patterns we have used to implement DevOps in new age companies, can we apply the same pattern in these new companies, and can we expect to get the same results? I think that's what we need to talk about now. And if we need to do anything differently, what are the things that we need to think about differently? Or are these large organizations really doomed? There's really no future left for them. I think these are the challenges which a lot of organizations right now are facing. In fact, when we talk about some of these organizations which have been in business and a lot of their systems are in productions, we have to also look at some of the DevOps tenets like fail fast, fail often, or MTTR over MTBF, and see if these tenets really do apply to the large organizations. For example, if you talk about Facebook, if they're introducing a new feature for a user profile, and in the worst case, the website goes down for a few seconds, I'm sure it'll be okay. Right? It will not be a disaster. But imagine doing that for Exchange, your NSE or BSE. If they say, well, in a day they go down every hour, and maybe if it's for a couple of seconds, that would be a disaster. So for a large organizations, some of these tenets really do not make sense. We have to have a system, DevOps, we have to have a system which does not really fail that often. So there is a need to think differently in these large organizations. So up next, what I'm going to talk about is some of the challenges, right, which are pretty unique to large organizations. And most of the challenges are from our experience at implementing DevOps at Broadridge. And we'll see if we can, how did we address those challenges? Okay, so implementing DevOps in a heterogeneous environment which has got a lot of legacy code is not going to be a straightforward process. It's not something that you can start from on day one and get it done in a few weeks. If you look at any large organization, particularly in Broadridge, we have got a legacy of application. Some of our applications are more than 15 years old. Some of these were developed in-house. Some of these were acquired over time. So we've got a technology stack which is very, very varied, right? And I think, again, we talked about, Mark very rightly pointed out the problem that we have with monolithic systems and why these monolithic systems are not agile and very hard to test and move around. On top of it, we also have mainframes. Yes, mainframes do exist, and they're still in existence. We have been trying to change them, but they're still there. So that's definitely one challenge. How do you kind of do something which is not just, it's not just a Java microservice-based architecture. We have to make sure that whatever we do, it should apply to all the various technology systems that we have across the organization. So second is people, right? So when we talk about DevOps, this is not a possibility to bring a large set of consultants from outside and DevOpsify the organization, right? We want to make sure that whatever we do, we need to make sure our existing workforce, existing people, we take them along, right? So other part is, I think we all heard that incentives drive behavior, and behaviors drive people. So again, being a legacy organization, some of our incentives are really not aligned to the way DevOps require them to be. For example, a QA team whose job or whose incentive is dependent on the number of issues which are there in production. I'm sorry to pick on them, but I could pick on anybody else, right? So if that's the kind of incentive that you have set for the team, trust me, they will be the biggest blocker in moving your software to the next stage. They'll continue to test it till you either give up or you change that incentive. So I think that was a big change as to how do you do that at a scale of an organization of 10 to 15,000 people. I mean, there is no conversation around DevOps which can go without talking about culture. So yes, just like any other organization, most of the organizations have a top-down culture where people delegate their risk or their decision making. They delegate it upward. You must have thought about delegating it downward, but mostly they do that, which means a lot of people are not really risk takers. So how do we change that culture? Tools and knowledges. Over a period of time, we as an organization has invested in tools which at that time were really cutting edge, which made sense for us to do that. And these tools and the knowledge of these tools is entrenched in a very large set of our workforce, and some of them are in the north of 50s. So how do we change that knowledge? That is something that we need to look at. At the same time, we need to make a very significant investments on the new set of trainings, tools, and processes. And again, making sure that our existing workforce is trained on those set of tools. Shared services, again, a silo-based approach, but this is something which told us that at some point it made a lot of sense to have a set of people together, use mutualization of infrastructure to get the maximum value for the business. But over a period of time, it becomes a big challenge because anything that you do, any change that you want to do is going to take a little longer than what is required. It has to be reviewed not just by your team, but all the other applications which are hosted together. Again, over a period of time, as we were developing, the technology and the solutions are becoming much more complex, much more diverse. Service-based architecture really exists in some places, but not really at a lot of places. So that's a really complex web of technologies that we need to see through to implement DevOps. And lastly, being a financial services industry focused in a company, we need to make sure that we have a stability, as we talked about. Fail fast, fail option doesn't work for us. Security and compliance has to be there. In some cases, there is internal compliance, our client compliance, and regulatory compliance. So we have to take care of all these three things apart from all the other challenges. So as I said, it's not possible to do all these things in day one. I'll just talk about some of the approaches that we have had to deal some of these challenges. So essentially, I would talk about these approaches in 4 broad areas. We started with something called application classification. This really was required for us to prioritize our efforts. So we started with applications which are new applications which are being developed right now. Those are mostly cloud-based, and DevOps is kind of a given for those applications. For some of our distributed applications, we basically collected a lot of matrices. For example, number of deployments that they do in a quarter. That tells us the application which are changing a lot, and for the application which we are getting new businesses. Those are the primary candidate for implementing, trying and experimenting on the DevOps side. Then there are other distributed applications. And lastly, we had mainframes, which we didn't really wanted to kind of start from day one. The other thing important was for us to speak the same language across the company. For that, we came up with a maturity model. This maturity model is nothing new. I think it's available on a lot of places. A lot of people use this. We customize it to our requirement. And it's not very clear, but it has got, basically it has got various stages and various areas. For there's a test area, there's a deployment area. And nobody has to be expert. It starts from beginner and goes up to the expert. You don't have to really become an expert. What you can actually do is you can actually start at a very basic level and iteratively enhance and improve your systems. So that allowed us to say, if I'm a beginner, what are the basic tenets I need to follow? And that kind of had a very similar conversation across project for all our company. And lastly, we implemented, on the major side, we implemented, we kind of invested a lot on tools which will give us quality, security, and compliance throughout the life cycle of our SDLC process. So that's an investment we made. Coming back to the people and the skill part, I don't know how many of you are aware of the Matthew Skeleton's team topology model. The model that we followed is basically, we carved out a team from our operations team. That team is responsible for doing the DevOps initiative, working very, very closely with the development team. But at the same time, we wanted to make sure that our people and our skills are upgraded throughout the company, as we talked about in the people challenge. So we kind of, we invited people to join conferences. The DevOps days, that's the first symbol, that is celebrated across the company so that people are aware of it, DevOps Developer Summit. So we ask and encourage people to join this summit to create awareness among our company. The other thing we did was we created something called a community of practice. So I talked about a COA team which was carved out from a central team, but at the same time we identified people from the project which wanted to kind of go to the DevOps side, and we aligned them with the COA team. It allowed us to share best practices across project. At the same time, COA team could train those teams and bring awareness across the company. And the last one, which is certification, we had a very unique way of doing certification. We encourage learning rather than the actual end goal, which is on certification. So for us, for DevOps, we tied up with a lot of online and offline providers to help us in our training. And we encourage people, whoever were attending training, to at least spend a finite amount of time and days after the training on actual DevOps project, either within their own project or if it is not available, outside their project. It allowed us to do two things. One, it allowed us to kind of contain the expenses. I mean, we don't have unlimited resources. So within those limited resources, we were able to identify people who are really, really passionate about DevOps to come forward. And also, when the people were attending trainings, we ensured that it is not just a theoretical training. They get an exposure practically to apply those concepts in a practical project. And obviously, we sponsored AWS certificates and all the certificates that if people complete that. Coming to the technology aspect, we came out with a preferred tool set. Again, enterprise-wide investment was made to come up with a preferred tool set. But understanding the heterogeneity of our environment, we came out with something called an outcome-based approach. It's a pretty simple one, which says that we care about the outcome and not the tool. So if the business has really invested in some tool and have got a lot of knowledge and workflows built into that tool, we will just use that same tool set and move forward with that. This has really allowed us to have conversation with business and cut some of their concerns about the investment that they have already made and salvage some of those investments. And lastly, the culture part of it. So we put together matrices to show business the result of the investment that they're making into DevOps. There's a very small dashboard of some of the matrices that we collect, the deployments before and after, and the effort that is used to spend before and after. But there's a whole set of matrices which tells business what are the benefits of implementing DevOps in their organization is. And that got a lot of business buy-in for us. Lastly, from a system side perspective, so from a testing perspective, as we talked about, a monolithics is not a very good place to test. It's not a very testable system. So we kind of focus, rather than a unit and integration testing, we focus more on the system testing side. And bi-model IT is a term which is Gartner buzzword. It says that your IT should be able to work with both the side of system. One is the AWS cloud-enabled, very, very fast-moving system. So that's the rabbit for you. And the other one are traditional systems like mainframe, which are still going at their own pace. Well, it's not tortoise, but just to kind of give the contrast. So I think that is something that has been going on for us on DevOps. And that's my last slide. I'll probably finish in my time. So what next for us? We wanted to still break our monolithic. I think some of the patterns that we talked about here could help us do that. I'll not do too much into detail on that. And put gate for each subsystem so that our system individually have quality gates. We wanted to improve our system test coverages. For some of the financial products, there is a requirement that we cannot really, compliance requirement that, or the client really are not really willing to go to a cloud. So for them, we still wanted to use AWS or any private or public cloud on the lower environments like development and QC, for us to be able to at least do that part of the whole SDLC lifecycle much more quicker and efficiently. And lastly, but the most important part is that we understand it's a cultural transformation more than a technology transformation, and we continue to focus on that part of our DevOps transformation. So with that, I think I come to an end. Thank you very much for your patience.